Greetings and welcome back to Biblical Musings. I hope you're enjoying our study on the book of Joshua. We're going to continue what we've been looking at and get into the book of Joshua in chapter 7, I believe it is. Before we do that, however, before we begin reading, I would like to give a little introduction and context because the story we're going to study today can be difficult. Not only is it difficult, it is painful. And so, to do what the text says appropriately and to do it justice, I believe having some appropriate context and historical context will be helpful to our modern ears in our study together. So, permit me to take a little bit longer of an intro today and do a little bit of rambling and maybe some jumping around just a little bit to set us up for Joshua chapter 7. I want to read from Leviticus 27, verse 28 first. And I encourage you to read more of the context, but this is not really a study on Leviticus. Leviticus chapter 27 and verse 28 says, "Nevertheless, anything which a man sets apart or devotes to the Lord out of all that he has, of a man or an animal or of the fields of his own property, shall not be sold or redeemed. Anything devoted toward destruction is most holy to the Lord." Devoted to destruction there, literally meaning put under the ban. So here we have kind of a principle for something called the ban. It would be anything that's devoted or set apart to God, to Jehovah, to the Lord, is devoted to destruction. Can't be sold, can't be parted with. He says if something is set apart, whether you do it or later we'll see when God does it, but if anything is set apart, saying this is not to be taken, this is not to be used, this is not to be enjoyed, this is not to be done with whatever you please. It's been set apart, devoted to the Lord, and not just devoted like here, it's God's property now. It's been devoted to destruction. It's been put under a ban. It's almost like it's been accursed, is a word we'll see in a little bit. Saying you can't do what you want with it. When something's set apart like that, it is under the ban. And the words that the text uses here is devoted to destruction, given over to destruction. So, very serious. And saying, when you do something like that, realize that it's not to be sold or redeemed. It's to be devoted to destruction. It's under the ban. It's under a curse. And that's going to be important. Let's turn to Joshua, but not Joshua chapter 7 just yet. Turn to Joshua chapter 6, if you would. The chapter we studied last week. We read the entire chapter, but I believe I made brief mention that we'd come back and deal with the section in more depth. And it is that time now. Beginning in verse 15 of Joshua chapter 6, the text says, "Then on the seventh day, the people of Israel, rose early at the dawning of the day and marched around the city," that is Jericho, "in the same manner 7 times. Only on that day they marched around the city 7 times. And at the 7th time, when the priests blew the trumpets, Joshua said to the people, 'Shout, for the Lord has given you the city. The city shall be under the ban. It and all that is in it belongs to the Lord,'" belongs to Jehovah. "Only Rahab the harlot and all who are with her in the house shall live, because she hid the messengers whom we sent." Verse 18 is key. "But as for you, only keep yourselves from the things under the ban, so that you do not covet them and take some of the things under the ban and make the camp of Israel accursed and bring trouble on it. But all the silver and the gold and the articles of bronze and iron are holy to the Lord. They shall go into the treasury of the Lord." So, Israel is about to swarm up the now crumbled walls of Jericho and take the first conquest in the land of Israel, that will be the land of Israel, the land of Canaan. And what their last instructions before they go into battle and take this first city, their first battle, which the Lord has miraculously won for them, What they need to know is, don't take anything for yourselves. Don't covet anything. This whole place has been put under the ban, has been devoted to destruction. It's been given to the Lord to do with as he pleases. Don't covet it, don't touch it. If you do, you will bring a curse on the people of Israel and bring trouble to the whole camp. Why would Israel be accursed by them touching it? Well, think about it this way. Let's say we had, 2 pots here. I don't have 2 pots, but let's just say we had 2 pots, and one of them had nuclear waste in it, and the other one had water. Now, if I dip my hand in the water, nothing happens except hopefully my hands get clean. But if I dip my hands in this incredibly dangerous, toxic substance, it's going to get all over me. And if I take it home, and if I leave where I'm at right now, and I touch doorknobs, and I touch people, and I touch my food, and I touch clothes, other people will be exposed to that toxic material. And so all the city of Jericho has been put under the ban, has been put under a thing called, we're going to devote this to destruction. And so if you take some of that home, Israel will be, trying to think of the right word, they'll be exposed and they'll be contaminated by the things that are devoted to destruction, thereby putting Israel with those things that are supposed to be destroyed. The things God has said, those will be destroyed. And we talked last week, I hope, and put some context to why Jericho is being destroyed. And so if you're a little bit confused on that, I'll encourage you to go back and watch last week's video and do some additional reading if you can. And so we won't deal with that more here. And so that's the seriousness of this. A couple other things before we get into Joshua chapter 7, however. I'm going to talk a little bit about love and selfishness. It is my personal belief that love is the exact opposite of selfishness. Biblical love. I'm not talking about love how the way the world defines it. But love, as exemplified and defined in the Bible, is when you put others above yourself. And selfishness, by definition, the very word, is putting yourself above all else. And so love is a beautiful, amazing thing. When I have selflessness and love toward my fellow man and those around me, it will cause me and lead me to actions that bless and motivate those around me and do good things for them and bring joy to those around me. But in so doing, even though I'm outwardly focused and I'm not trying to bless myself when I'm showing biblical love, the result is that I end up being blessed. It's almost like an osmosis effect. Even if those I'm showing love to reject me and hurt me in various ways, as they can do and sometimes do. In the end, the fact of me having that loving spirit and doing those loving actions can't help but bring blessing to my life, bring joy to my life, even in the midst of pain. But likewise, selfishness, even though it's inwardly focused and it's all just about me, the things I'm doing, the things I do, the things I say, whatever it is, the goals I have, when I take those actions and I adopt those thoughts as my own, it doesn't just bring bitterness and pain to my life. It absolutely will to my life, but it doesn't just do it to my life. It does it to those around me as well. Selfishness and selfish gain and seeking of one's own interest above all else can destroy relationships. It absolutely can. It can destroy families. It can destroy your friends. It can bring real pain and bitterness to your life. And so those two are really antithesis to one another in my belief. Another topic of conversation, I know we're jumping around a little bit, but I'm hoping to tie it all in together when we get to chapter 7, is the people of Israel. Now, God in the book of Exodus, at the beginning, which we haven't studied, but maybe we can sometime, God rescues the people of Israel from slavery in Egypt, where they've been for centuries, for generations. after he rescues them from slavery in Egypt and adopts them as his own people and only wishes to bless them and bring them into a land flowing with milk and honey and give them his laws whereby they may live happy, joy-filled lives of worship and blessing. That's all he wants for them. But the people of Israel reject him again and again and again in the wilderness. And their final rejection leading to the death of this generation in Joshua's mothers and fathers, their parents, in their entirety, die in the wilderness. Think about that. Hundreds of thousands of men and women lay in graves out in the desert because they were rebellious, because they were selfish, because they would not take the blessings God wanted to give them. They were stubborn, they were stiff-necked, and they had a lot of issues. I encourage you to study Israel's wanderings in the wilderness. It's frustrating being here and trying to put yourself in the shoes of the leadership dealing with those people. It's not a story that brightens you up a whole lot. Anyway, so that's the context of the people of Israel. Here we are in Joshua. It's the next generation. The children of those who came out of Egypt are here. They're the ones God has said, I'm going to give you the land. They can still mess up. They can. But they haven't done so yet. And as we've seen in Joshua, they've done pretty good. They've obeyed. They've been motivated. They've been devoted. The first thing they did after crossing the Jordan was get spiritually right and in the right covenant with God again. And so God is doing something special. God wants to bless them, but it's still in jeopardy, if you will, because this is the first generation that needs to get it right. They need to set a pattern for their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren to follow for successive generations, because a lot hangs on this. This is the founding of the Israelite nation, if you will. Yes, there are people. Yes, they have laws, but the three things you need for a nation are a people, a system, and you need somewhere you live. They don't have that yet. That's what they're getting in the book of Joshua. So they'll be a nation when this book is done. But this is the founding of their nation in a lot of ways. And so they need to get it right, because this will be the pattern by which successive generations look back to. If you're in America and you're watching this video, we often look back to the revolution and the founding of our country, where the principles for what makes America the country it is, with its problems and its blessings, all of that, not really the conversation for today, but that's where the pattern was set up. That's where the founding began. And so those times are especially critical, because they're the times successive generations will look back to, for example, on how they're supposed to live or how they're supposed to think or whatever. And so the actions that happen in chapter 7 are more than just the actions of one man. And they're more than just the actions of one man that affect his family, and they're more important than even the actions of one man which affects a nation. It's bigger even than the entire nation of Israel at the present time. It's going to affect future generations for a very long time. And so it's hard to understate the importance and significance and the seriousness of what happens here. And it's easy to miss it if you're not paying attention. Whew. With all that said, I think it's time to get into Joshua chapter 7 and verse 1. So if you've got your Bibles, I'd encourage you to open them. And we'll begin reading and read verse 1 together. It says, "But the sons of Israel acted unfaithfully in regard to the things under the ban, for Achan, the son of Carmi, the son of Zabdi, the son of Zerah, from the tribe of Judah, took some of the things under the ban. Therefore the anger of the Lord burned against the sons of Israel." Can you understand why God's angry? Why his anger burns? Do you know how many bodies lie in the wilderness because the people there were rebellious and God couldn't give them the blessings he desperately wanted? That's in danger of happening again because these people are rebelling. They're now under the curse. So we'll get back to that. But meanwhile, the people of Israel keep doing their thing, and Joshua is doing his thing as leader. Verse 2 says, Now Joshua sent men from Jericho to Ai, which is near Bethaven, east of Bethel, and said to them, Go up and spy out the land. So the men went up and spied out Ai, and they returned to Joshua and said to him, Do not let all the people go up. Only about 2,000 or 3,000 men need to go up to Ai. Don't make all the people toil up there, for they are few. So about 3,000 men from the people went up there. But they fled from the men of Ai, and the men of Ai struck down about 36 of their men and pursued them from the gate as far as Shebarim, and struck them down on the descent, so the hearts of the people melted and became as water. So a simple little tale. What has happened? Joshua sent spies out to check out Ai, the next little town. Jericho is a big mighty city. Ai is a little bitty town somewhere. And the spies come back and say, Man, it's a small little place. Don't make everybody walk up the mountain up there. We'll just send 2,000 or 3,000 people. They can take care of this, and then we'll be all good to go. And so Joshua listens to them. And the result? They flee before the men of Ai. 36 men die. And even more important, all of Israel is melting in fear. Because, you see, they're a relatively small nation trying to conquer many large nations, powerful nations, old nations. They no longer have a reputation of being unbeatable. Now they've been defeated by a tiny little town somewhere. And so the rest of the kings around could take heart and may have destroyed them. But notice what wasn't in this little story. Did you notice it? Did you notice the part where Joshua asked God if this was a thing they should do? It wasn't there, was it? Did you notice where the elders of Israel sat down and prayed and said, God, is this the decision we need to do? Are we okay to move ahead and go on with the conquest of Ai? No, they didn't. I'm going to break briefly and mention Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Such a beautiful verse. Such a motivating verse. However, if one doesn't have humility and the right attitude, one can get the attitude where I can do all things with Christ who strengthens me, or something along that nature. And it turns to a focus on me. You see, Israel's just had a massive, amazing victory over Jericho and its king. But they didn't do that. God did that, and they reaped the benefits. Now, they obeyed, and it was by faith that the walls of Jericho fell, as we studied last week. But it was God who did the miracle. They just obeyed and were faithful. Now they're reaching out on their own. But we saw in verse 1 how they already acted unfaithfully in regard to the things of the band. So God's not with them. And we see when God is not with them, they can't even defeat a tiny little town somewhere. So let's get back into our text. Verse 6 through following says, Then Joshua tore his clothes and fell to the earth on his face before the ark of the Lord until the evening, both he and the elders of Israel, and they put dust on their heads. Joshua said, Alas, O Lord God, why did you ever bring this people over the Jordan, only to deliver us into the hand of the Amorites to destroy us? If only we had been willing to dwell beyond the Jordan. O Lord, what can I say, since Israel has turned their back before their enemies? For the Canaanites and all the inhabitants of the land will hear of it, and they will surround us and cut us off our name from the whole earth. And what will you do for your great name? So we see Joshua and the elders are in great consternation over this. And at least they're seeking the Lord now. Verse 10, the Lord's response is surprising to me, but it's not surprising at the same time. So the Lord said to Joshua, Rise up! Why is it that you've fallen on your face? What are you doing, Joshua? Israel has sinned, and they also have transgressed my covenant which I commanded them. They've even taken some of the things under the ban and have both stolen and deceived. Moreover, they have also put them among their own things. Therefore, The sons of Israel cannot stand before their enemies. They turn their backs before their enemies, for they have become accursed. I will not be with you any more unless you destroy the things under the ban from your midst. Rise up, consecrate the people, set them apart, and say, consecrate yourselves for tomorrow. For thus the Lord, the God of Israel, has said, there are things under the ban in your midst, O Israel. You cannot stand before your enemies until you have removed the things under the ban from your midst. In the morning, then you shall come near by your tribes, and it shall be that the tribe which the Lord takes by lot shall come near by families. And the family which the Lord takes shall come near by households, and the household which the Lord takes shall come near man by man. And it shall be that the one who has taken the things under the ban shall be burned with fire, he and all that belongs to him, because he has transgressed the covenant of the Lord, and because he has committed a disgraceful thing in Israel. So the Lord reveals to Joshua what's really going on. Someone has brought the camp of Israel under the ban, to be accursed. They have stolen, they have deceived, they have broken the covenant, they have put it with their own things. They've taken things that belong to the Lord and put them among their own property. This may not seem serious to us unless we have a respectful view of things that are holy to the Lord. Now, if you're familiar with the Ark of the Covenant, you know that it is holy to the Lord. Only the priests may carry it, and only the high priest may even enter the room where it sits one day a year, and not without being cleansed and offering sacrifice and bringing the altar of incense with him one time a year. And he only goes in to offer atonement for the whole people. That's holy. Several people will die for touching it when they should not have. Because the Lord said, do not touch it. It is holy. You see, God cannot be in the presence of sin. God's righteousness is so pure and his holiness so bright that it's not that he hates us so much that he would destroy us because he doesn't want us near him. It's because he is so holy that if we are close to him, we would be destroyed because of how sinful we are. So God cannot be in the presence of sin. The entire sacrificial system, if I understand it correctly, is about bringing mankind who is sinful and dirty and all of that into fellowship with a holy God. And I encourage you to do a study of the sacrificial system at some time. It's a beautiful, amazing study. But now, things that are God's have been stolen by sinful men and put with their own things, and they've lied and they've deceived and they've broken the covenant. And so Israel is accursed, and they're to come by family until the one who is guilty is singled out. And that's exactly what they do in the next part. It says, so Joshua arose early in the morning and brought Israel near by tribes, and the tribe of Judah was taken. And he brought the family of Judah near, and he took the family of the Zerahites. And he brought the family of the Zerahites near man by man, and Zabdi was taken. And he brought his household near man by man, and Achan son of Carmi, son of Zabdi, son of Zerah, from the tribe of Judah was taken. Then Joshua said to Achan, my son, I implore you, give glory to the Lord, the God of Israel, and give praise to him. And tell me now what you have done. Do not hide it from me. So Achan answered Joshua and said, truly, I have sinned against the Lord, the God of Israel, and this is what I did. When I saw among the spoil a beautiful mantle from Shinar, that would be Babylon, and 200 shekels of silver, and a bar of gold 50 shekels in weight, that I coveted them, and I took them, and behold, they're concealed in the earth inside my tent with the silver underneath it. So Joshua sent messengers, and they ran to the tent. And behold, it was concealed in his tent with the silver underneath it. And they took them from inside the tent and brought them to Joshua and to all the sons of Israel, and they poured them out before the Lord. Then Joshua and all Israel with him took Achan, the son of Zerah. They took the silver and the mantle and the bar of gold and his sons and his daughters and his oxen and his donkeys and his sheep and his tent and all that belonged to him. And they brought them up to the valley of Achor. That would be the valley of trouble. And Joshua said, "Why have you troubled us? The Lord will trouble you this day." And all Israel stoned them with stones, and they burned them with fire, after they had stoned them with stones. And they raised over him a great heap of stones that stands to this day. And the Lord turned from the fierceness of his anger. Therefore the name of that place has been called the Valley of Achor, or the Valley of Trouble, translated, to this day. The thing that stands out to me most is one lesson. Sin is not a trifle. Sin is a tragedy. Achan coveted the things that were devoted to destruction. He coveted them, and then he took them, and then he brought them home to his tent, to his family, thereby putting all Israel, but especially those closest to him, under the ban, bringing the curse which God had already said, and God cannot lie, brought it home to his own family. And the result, his selfishness, his covetousness, his theft, and his lying and his deception cost his life and the lives of those close to him, and nearly cost the lives of Israel. And it did cost the lives of 36 of his brothers. Those men who went up to take the city of Ai, 36 of them died. There was 36 other families that night who went to bed without a father, or a brother, or a husband. You see, the sin of Achan was bigger than just him, and the cost was heavy. And that is why you cannot overstate or simplify sin. Sin is not a trifle, it's a tragedy, and it hurts real people, and it causes real damage. It really does. The glimpse of hope, and also the sad counterpart to the story of Ai and Achan in the valley of Achor, is Rahab. And I know we talked about Rahab last week. I'm going to mention her here, so we'll have a bright spot this week. But in all the city of Jericho, which was devoted to destruction because of their sin and because of all the things we discussed last week, Rahab and her entire household, her whole family, were spared. Why? Because she had faith. Because she trusted in God and she tried to obey him. And she did. And the result, she and her entire household were saved. And we read about how she lived on in Israel and had a legacy of faith. Her family had a legacy of faith. David, Jesse, Boaz, David's brothers, the kings of Israel, getting all the way down to Jesus, the Christ himself. What a legacy. But at the same time that story was playing out in the Battle of Jericho, another man named Achan, who grew up knowing about God, who grew up partaking of manna in the wilderness, who grew up around the sacrificial system and seeing the holiness of God and seeing and enjoying fellowship with God and partaking of his blessings with the hope of the things God would give them in the future. They're about to receive the land of promise flowing with milk of honey. And when he sees silver and gold and some beautiful robes, he decides that's more important than faith. And the cost is high. So what's the lesson for us? We need to be more like a prostitute who had faith than a man who grew up next to God and was selfish.